You felt the pull to do something meaningful, but between burnout, uncertainty, and a calendar that's already too full, volunteering seems impossible. This June, discover how serving isn't about adding another obligation to your life. It's about finding the place where your gifts, your story, and God's mission intersect in ways that actually give you life. You'll learn how to find your fit, recruit without guilt, and serve with joy instead of exhaustion.
I have a confession to make. I'm an efficiency addict. I like to get things done as fast and efficient as possible. And you know what the fastest way to get something done is? It's to do it yourself. You don't have to explain it to anybody. You don't have to apprentice or work on the whole delegation thing. You just go and you do it. You get it done. And of course, I think I don't have the time to onboard somebody for how to do this. A couple of months ago, I found myself setting up and tearing down after an event all by myself. It was like, all by myself. Anyway, I was probably singing. I wasn't really throwing myself a pity party, but I was thinking, what in the world? Why didn't I work with anybody to be here with me? It was maybe the first time of the 3 years that this campus has been open that I was doing this by myself. Now, this one event by itself wasn't overwhelming. I enjoyed the event. I looked forward to the event. And in some sense, the physicalness of just tearing it down afterwards and cleaning up, that was kind of gratifying. But this wasn't something that I could sustain over the long haul. It wasn't something that was going to help this campus thrive past 2 or 3 years into decades after. And also there was something else happening. I was keeping all of the joy to myself. There is a joy that comes in making an event happen. I've thought of myself as having the gift of getting things done, but my coach has told me in the past, you got to stop thinking like that. You got to start thinking about you have the gift of making things happen. You get things done by doing it yourself. You make things happen by inviting other people into it with you. There's a parenting equivalent to this whole thing. It's faster to get the chores done by myself at home rather than to teach my kids. I'll just do the dishes. I'll just take out the trash. I'll just pick up the clutter. I'll just do the vacuuming. I'll just clean the bathrooms. I'll just make sure the laundry is done. But really what I'm doing for them is I'm setting them up for failure in the future. I'm setting it up so that they're dependent on somebody else doing all this stuff for them. In fact, future wives, you can thank me for not doing that. We all have some version of this in ourselves. We all would rather, and many times, do it ourselves than apprentice somebody else or invite somebody to do it with us. Some of us are perfectionists. We think that if anybody else does it beside us, it won't be done well enough. They won't care enough about it. They won't pay as much attention to details as we do. Some of us assume that it's the staff, it's the leaders who are going to do it. That's what we pay them for, right? Have you ever heard the story about everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody? There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought that anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. Did you follow all that? Some of us are just too Midwestern. We don't want to inconvenience anybody around us. So it's if I ask them to do that, it's going to put a burden on them. But if I do it myself, then I don't have to do that. One of my favorite YouTube channels is Miles Montplaisir of You Betcha. He's a native North Dakotan, and he does all of these things about, well, Midwestern culture. I want you to watch this. This is like a meandering video, but it eventually gets to the point, and I think you'll enjoy the journey. Watch and laugh.
Today I'm going to teach you how to speak Midwestern. First thing you need to learn is the ABCs, which in the Midwest is the yeah, no, yes. If we want to tell you no, we'll say yeah, no. And if we want to tell you yes, we'll say no, yeah. And if we want to tell you maybe, we'll say yeah, no, yeah. And I've tried to figure it out, but I can't make sense of it. So don't question it, just accept it, you know? We'll also need to learn how to do small talk in the Midwest, which is very simple. All you got to do is point out obvious stuff. The more obvious, the better. If you're at the bar with your buddy, you'll say something like, wow, bar's busy tonight. He can see that. He knows that it's busy, but that's just how we talk. Or if you see an animal, just shout out its species. Deer, cow, turkey. And when it comes to weather, you just say stuff like, hey, it's snowing out. But where the real magic happens is when they say, yeah, those are some big flakes. Next thing you know, you're best friends. Now I got to tell you how to ask for a favor, paired with a way for them to get out of it. Let me just show you. Hey man, would you mind helping me move on Saturday? If you don't have time, that's fine. Like, I don't want to inconvenience you. Or feel free to say no, but will you marry me? If not, that's totally fine. We are so afraid of inconveniencing people that we always give them an out. We'd rather suffer alone than make someone do something they don't want to do. So no, yeah, that's about it. And if you're not too busy, we'd love if you could comment anything that we missed. But if not, if it's too much inconvenience, you don't have to.
That's just, how true is that? How true is that? I was watching that with our Duke intern recently, who's from Virginia, and he was finding that helpful for explaining Midwestern culture. In the meantime, we wait, and we wait, and we wait, and nobody helps. It doesn't get done. Creative partnerships fail, ministries plateau, and meanwhile, one poor person is burning out trying to carry too much stuff for one person to carry. But here's what really breaks my heart. While we're doing it all ourselves or waiting for someone else to recruit, there are people right here, people you know, who are longing for someone to notice them. There are people right here longing for someone to notice them, to belong. They have gifts that haven't been discovered. They have talents that they're just sitting on the sidelines, waiting to be used, to be asked to be used. They're wondering, will anyone notice me? Pastor Mikkel at our South Lansing campus has had this experience in the past where her husband is up on the stage doing worship leadership, and she's sitting in the congregation, and she has this growing sense of call to be a pastor. And because of the context she came in, women weren't usually seen or ever seen as pastors. And they would see her husband on stage and think, even not just think, but ask him, would you ever want to be a pastor? And here she is sitting in the pews, in the seats, having this call to be a pastor, and nobody is asking her. That just breaks my heart. It can also happen this way, like sometimes like somebody is so consistent in their volunteer role that we as leaders need to create a kind of leadership vacuum. We need to have moments of rest. An example would be if you have a drummer who is the drummer every single Sunday. Somebody shows up and their talent is being a drummer, and they see that there's a drummer always on stage, and they think, well, they don't need my talent. We need to create leadership or volunteer vacuums from time to time, which both give regular volunteers a rest and like create pores in the relationship for new people to come in. I saw this happen with Pastor Mark Opperly when he was called to be a pastor. Before that, he was leading our small group ministry here at Sycamore Creek. And when he went to become pastor at our Potterville campus, there became a leadership vacuum. And Tim Newman stepped into that leadership vacuum. Now, what I'm about to say, Pastor Mark would agree with 100%. Pastor Mark was a great small groups leader. Tim Newman is an excellent small groups leader. He's better than Mark. And we would, if Mark had stayed in that role, in that volunteer role, we would have never had the opportunity. We would have been leaving somebody with amazing talent on the sidelines. All of this brings us to the point of today's message. If you take away one thing and only one thing, here's what I want you to take away. You're not just called to volunteer, you're called to make space to belong. You're not called just to volunteer, you're called to make space for other people to belong. To belong as part of this church, to belong as part of this community, to belong in the ministry and mission of God here at Sycamore Creek in the Lansing region. When there's only one person doing this belonging space making, it only can fit around their network. But when everybody is doing it, when everybody is engaged in making space to belong, well, then now you're tapping into a much bigger network, a much bigger community of making even more space for even more people to belong. We like to take time in our messages to stop, give you a chance to gather your thoughts and talk with somebody beside you. So talk to somebody beside you or put your answer in the comments to this question. When was the last time you did something yourself instead of inviting someone to learn it with you, even when you knew you shouldn't do it all by yourself? Let's talk about that. Today we're continuing a series called Volunteering, and it's based on a book by the same name, Volunteering, by Leith Anderson and Jill Fox. They say, your life is like a coin. You can spend it any way you want, but you can only spend it once. Your life is like a coin. You can spend it any way you want, but you can only spend it once. Part of what I'm trying to get across today when we're talking about the point of today's message is that this is a way to spend your coin on something that lasts. You're not just called to volunteer, you're called to make space to belong. Belonging lasts. How you spend your time to make space for people to belong, well, that's much bigger than yourself. Now, Jesus could have done everything himself. I mean, he had all the power, he had all the authority, he had all the knowledge. He was God incarnate. He could have done it by himself, but that's not how he did it. A lot of times we focus on Jesus' 12 disciples, but do you know that Jesus had more disciples, more apprentices than just those 12? In Luke's telling of Jesus' life, he says, the Lord now chose 72. Did you catch that? Not 12, 72. 72 other disciples, and sent them ahead in pairs to all the towns and places he planned to visit. I'm sure that these 72 people didn't do it anywhere near as well as Jesus did. They probably dropped some balls, they probably ignored some details, but Jesus entrusted this mission to ordinary, imperfect people. He apprenticed them, he trusted them, he sent them ahead of him. Jesus could have done it by himself, but he chose to multiply his mission through the talents, through the imperfections, through the work, through the commitment of other people, other volunteers. He didn't guilt them, he didn't manipulate them, he just invited them. Follow me and do what I do. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at a passage. It's a passage full of a deep metaphor that Paul, the first missionary of the church and author of many of the books of the Bible, wrote to the Christians at Rome. Paul says, in God's grace, God has given us different gifts for doing certain things well. So if God has given you the ability to prophesy, speak out with as much faith as God has given you. And if your gift is serving others, serve them well. If you are a teacher, teach well. If your gift is to encourage others, be encouraging. If it is giving, give generously. I especially like that one. If God has given you leadership ability, take the responsibility seriously. And if you have a gift for showing kindness to others, do it gladly. Paul's using this metaphor of a body to say that each person has their part. Each part of the body has its specific talent, its specific purpose. If you've ever broken your pinky toe, you never pay attention to your pinky toe until it's broken. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I can barely walk without this little thing. But when one part of the body tries to do everything, the whole body suffers. The whole body suffers when it's missing one part. Now, here's the shift we have to make in churches. Again, we tend to think like the pastor's leading all of this, but here's the shift. You know people that I don't know. You know their gifts, you know their talents, you know them just relationally, you know how to invite them to be a part of the body in a way that I simply don't, because I'm one person. Now, this is people both inside the church and outside the church. You have credibility with people that I will never have credibility with. When I invite people to belong by volunteering or by using their gift or talent, we're limited to my network. But when we all do it, that network multiplies exponentially. Now, that's how the Spirit of God moves, moving through each one of us, not just one of us. All right, so we're going to get down to brass tacks now. We're going to get down to rubber meets the road. Here are the things that I'm asking you to do. Let's call this recruiting for everyone. So the first thing is, stop doing it all yourself. I'm preaching to myself here right now. If you find yourself doing something alone, let's get used to that being a trigger that I'm doing this alone. I should invite somebody to do it with me. I should invite somebody, I should apprentice them. I should let them watch. We should do it together. You know the basic apprentice model, right? This isn't just in church. This is like any kind of apprenticeship. It's I do, you watch, we do together, you do, I watch. And then ideally you go and do that whole process with somebody else, apprenticing them. I had a classic experience of this in the trades when Sarah and I bought our first house up in Petoskey, Michigan. I had a guy in my church who was an electrician, and the house that we bought was a 100-year-old house. It needed to be rewired. So Mike came over to our house and he showed me what needed to happen. And I would just sit and I would ask questions and he would answer them, but he was doing all of the work. And then that maybe lasted 30 minutes, maybe an hour. And then for several hours after that, we did the work together. He would be watching over my shoulder and I would be watching him. And then at some point I'd be on one end of the line and he'd be on the other end of the line. And we were doing the work together. Well, once he felt confident that I had some basic idea of, well, more than basic, a significant competence in how this needed to happen, he left. And I rewired probably 75% of the rest of my house. And then he came back over to look over my work to make sure that I wasn't going to burn my house down. That's how the apprenticeship model works. That's how it is to invite somebody in to do it. Now we're taking that this summer and we're multiplying that even further because we have a pastoral intern. John King is walking around shadowing me and Pastor Mikkel and Pastor Mark a little bit and all of you to see and learn how we do church here at Sycamore Creek so that he can take the bits and pieces of what the Holy Spirit is at work here and take it with him wherever the Spirit leads him. So first, stop doing it by yourself. The second thing I'm asking you to do is make it personal. Almost everybody who's in charge of something or trying to organize something, they want me as the pastor to just send out a mass email, stand up in front of everybody and say, hey, this thing needs to get done, or there's this opportunity that's happening. And I'm happy to do that. But this mass communication, it really doesn't work anywhere near as well as a really personal invitation. It's hey, I see in you this passion and this talent for this thing that I'm a part of. We call this a I see in you conversation. I see in you that you would be really good at this. I think you would belong in this space. You make it personal. People say yes to people who see them. People say yes when they feel seen by the people around them and invite them to belong. All right, that's the second thing. Make it personal. Here's the third thing I'm asking you to do. Share the why, not just the what. Don't say, we need help with setup. In fact, the word need, that should be a 4-letter word. We need to cross the word need out. Instead say, hey, we're trying to make a space here where people who have been burned or traumatized by the church can feel safe. And that includes how we set the space up. Would you be willing to help us create that space where people can feel safe and be surprised again by how God is working in a community of faith here at Sycamore Creek? What do you think? Come join me. Share the why, not just the what. All right, here's the fourth thing. Let people test it. When somebody says yes to volunteering, they don't have to stay in that position until Jesus comes back or until the zombie apocalypse or whatever the apocalypse looks like. Give them a chance to try it out for a week or two. See what it's like. Let them, it's like trying on some clothes. See if they fit. And if they don't, it's no big deal to let them go on and move on. In fact, somebody who's found their fit in a specific place, that's not somebody who's going to burn out. But if you try to wedge them into a place where they don't fit and you don't give them a kind of trial period, but they say yes to it because they're also Midwestern and they don't want to inconvenience you by saying no, that's a recipe for burnout. Let them taste it. Let them try it. And then let them move on if it's not right. Here's a pro tip. If it's not the right fit for them, ask them, well, you've seen this for a couple weeks. Do you know anybody who it would be? All right, here's the fifth and last thing I'm asking you to do. Recruit together. If you're leading something, don't carry it alone. Invite other people to help you brainstorm how and who could be involved in this. Don't go down that path of carrying the whole thing by yourself. When inviting people to belong becomes a group activity, then it becomes sustainable. 2.5, 3 years ago when we cut that ribbon and we said, hey, we're open, it was really clear that everybody had to pitch in. Everybody had to find their role because it was obvious, I'm not going to do all of this. We need everybody joining in. So sometimes you would show up and on your first day here, you're already volunteering. But 2.5, 3 years in, there's a temptation for things to begin to solidify. For it to be well, the people who are in charge, they got it covered. We have to resist that temptation. We have to go back and reclaim this practice that we do it together. We make space for everyone to belong by inviting them to participate with us. I don't want to fall into selling this as if it's this is easy or that this is the silver bullet. I'll tell you what, volunteer recruitment and management and support, that's the hardest thing to do in any organization. I was recently driving with a small business owner and I said, what's the thing that you like least about your business? And he said, all of the HR stuff. Even with paid staff, people management is the hardest thing to do. And it doesn't matter whether you're a paid staff member like me, who's managing volunteers, or you're a volunteer leader. It is hard. That's why it takes all of us doing it together. All right, remember the point? You're not just called to volunteer, you're called to make space to belong. All right, let's stop for a minute and let's do some conversation together. Here's a chat question. Who's one person you could invite this week to serve with you or check out your area? And what's the why and not just the what? Let's talk about it. All right, Here's a pop quiz. What's the point of this message? Like, I'm gonna put it on the screen here, but think it, or say it out loud, or type it in the comments. What's the point of today's message? Here it is. You're not just called to volunteer, you're called to make space to belong. Imagine a church where it's not awkward to invite people to volunteer. It's not guilt-driven. It's every team thinking, who's not here? Who needs to belong? Who's sitting on the sidelines like Pastor Mikkel, waiting to find a place where their talent and their passion, their purpose and meaning can be found in belonging by volunteering in the mission of this church. Imagine that church. Imagine somebody walking into this church building, this stage 1 at Sycamore Creek Eastwood, and they come up the stairs and they see art hanging all around, and it's like a place where local artists belong with their talents. Imagine them walking up into the lobby and they see the next show that Peppermint Creek or Ixion is doing, and they walk into the stage area and they see on this stage a set that transports them and delivers them to somewhere imaginary, somewhere creative, somewhere to tell a story like the stories that Jesus told. Imagine them walking back out and seeing a nursery where little kids are safe and parents can have a break for like an hour and a half or so from being a parent and just be an adult amongst other adults, engaging a message that is practical and relevant and true and spiritual. Imagine somebody walking into our building and they go downstairs and they see the kitchen and they see businesses and entrepreneurs growing a business, not just feeding themselves, not just feeding the church, but feeding an entire community where these business owners have found a place to belong. Imagine that church. And I think you will imagine Sycamore Creek, or at least you'll imagine what we're trying to build and create here. A community where people belong, where their talents, their time, their gifts, their volunteering says, I belong here. These are my people. This is my spiritual family. When I boil down everything that we do here into like its most basic essence, I think it comes down to this. We make new friends and we share our stuff. And we share our stuff so people have a sense that they belong, a sense of where their talents, where their calling, where their mission in life can find the stuff, the resources to be lived out. We share our platform so people have a stage to belong with their art. We share our walls so that artists have a place to belong with their paintings, with their photographs, with whatever the three-dimensional visual art is that is their mission and purpose in life. We share our kitchen so that entrepreneurs can belong when it comes to their love of making food, good food for other people. We make new friends, and we share our stuff. And we invite people in so that they can belong. When we all do this sort of inviting, when we all do this sort of apprenticing, we're not just filling slots, we're making space for people to belong. Let's walk back out to the lobby for just a minute. And imagine that Ross is sitting at a table. He's maybe got his head in his hands and he's feeling a bit overwhelmed. He's feeling overwhelmed because, well, I've asked him to do something. And part of what I've asked him to do is to find 5 or 10 volunteers to do it with him. And Ross isn't quite sure where he's going to find all those volunteers. But out of the media booth steps Rome, and Rome walks by Ross sitting at the table, and Rome notices that Ross is a bit, well, downcast. And he walks up to Ross and says, hey, what's going on? And Ross looks at him and he says, I got to find all these volunteers. Pastor Tom has asked me to do this thing for this ministry that we've got going on, this event. And I'm just feeling overwhelmed. I've got like 3, but I need like 7 more. And Rome says, hey, why don't I help you with that? I know a couple people. And he sits down. At that moment, Ross gets a big smile on his face, or his demeanor changes. He's not doing this alone anymore. He's got somebody helping him. And they write out a list of people and they divvy it up and they commit to each of them going to invite somebody, not to fill a slot, but to belong, to find their purpose and mission here at Sycamore Creek. But here's what Ross really learns in that moment. He's not called to invite alone. He's not called to recruit alone. He's not called to apprentice alone. He's called to do it as a team. Because when he does it alone, it's just his network for inviting people to belong. But when he does it as a team, it's everybody's. So let's go back to that point one more time. You're not just called to volunteer. You're called to make space for somebody else to belong. You're not called to just volunteer. You're called to make space to belong for someone else to belong. Now go and do it.